We're going to be in Joshua chapter 2 again. And we left off last week with Rahab and studying about her faith and obedience. We compared that with what we read about in James chapter 2 and the action required for faith, to show our faith. It's not just something that we can say and it happened, but we are made righteous because of our faith, and that faith would be an obedient faith. This week we're going to look at the story of Rahab again, this example, from a different point of view. I alluded to it a little bit last week in how she was saved, the manner of which she was saved. And this scene plays out throughout Scripture. We can see several examples in the Old Testament, within a few books of this, of Noah being saved, of Israel being saved in similar ways. This is kind of an archetypal example in the entire Bible of an action being required in order to obtain salvation. It's not just something that we can say and it just happens. There's something that we need to do in order to be able to be saved. And so we have Rahab here, and we've met her. We've talked about her last week, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot more time discussing about her, but she does have a sordid past. She's not a righteous woman when the spies meet her. They're there to spy out this land as the promised land. And these spies are almost caught. And they go and they hide in Rahab's house. She protects them. And we see her here in chapter 2, verse 12, making this confession of faith. That she believes that the God of Israel is the one true God. And that's not all it takes, though. Because as the spies are there and the men come and capture them, she takes and she says, go and hide. And so she makes this confession. She puts her faith in these two men rather than the walls of the city that she's in, or the government that she is a part of, or the government that she is under, rather. And so when Rahab is here in this city, she's not there thinking that she's safe and sound, but rather she's maybe feeling trapped. Trapped behind walls that she can't escape. Trapped from an enemy that is going to come and she believes is capable of completely destroying her way of life. And so rather than continuing down the path that she believes leads to destruction, she decides to put her faith and her hope in the God of Israel, which are represented by these two men here that she's going to protect. And so she makes the confession of faith. And she asks to spare her father, her mother, her brothers, sisters, all they have, and deliver our lives from death. She makes this confession, and then she's given instruction in verse 17. The men said, "We will be blameless of the oath of yours, which you've made us swear, unless when we come to the land, you bind this line of scarlet cord in the window through which you let us out down. And unless you bring your father and your mother and your brother and your father's household to your own home. So that it will be that whoever goes outside the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be on his own head, and we will be guiltless. And whoever is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head if a hand is laid on him." They give her this scarlet cord. You know, when my understanding of them, when we invaded Normandy, and it was nighttime when the paratroopers paratrooped in, they parachuted in, and they had these little clickers, because it was dark and it was a war zone, and you can't be running around yelling American English at each other to confirm who you were, and you couldn't turn a flashlight on to see that they were in an American uniform, and so they had the little clickers. Click, click, click. So they know who was the enemy and who wasn't. And that's why this scarlet cord kind of operated. She, almost like a flag, like a banner hanging out her window. showing that this is where she was so that they wouldn't kill her. Now, her house was inside the city walls. This isn't something described in some of the commentaries, and there's some pictures that they've kind of represented how this might have looked, but it wasn't just one wall, but it was a really thick wall, thick enough that people could live inside of the wall. So there was a wall, and then some houses kind of stacked up within it, living quarters in it, and then another wall, and then you have the city proper. She was one of those houses that was in the wall. She lived inside of it. Well, we know as we read through Joshua in the next couple of chapters, that wall is going to come tumbling down. They're going to walk around it, and God's going to make the walls fall. That's where she lives. She had this scarlet cord tied on her window, so they knew that's where she was, and they're not going to go in and kill anybody in that house. And so they leave. So we've got the instruction, we've got the confession, and the instruction of how she's going to be saved. If you do this, you tie this red ribbon, this red cord, and you stay inside the house, anybody there is going to be saved. They'll be safe and sound, and nobody's going to die. But if you leave the house, their blood's on their own head. We are not responsible for that. If you do what we tell you to, if you follow the instructions of this kind of covenant that they make with each other. And so they leave. She sends them out, and as we look through here, I tried to figure out how many days it was from the time they left to the time the walls came down. Well, they left and they hid out for 3 days in the wilderness, in the mountains. And then they came to the camp. And they were there for 3 days. And then they crossed over into the promised land from the other side of the Jordan. They crossed over, and they were there. And before that, I think they circumcised all those who hadn't been circumcised yet. And it said they stayed there until they were all healed up. Now, I don't know how long that takes, but I'm imagining it's a couple of days from something like that. That surgical procedure probably is pretty painful. And so it wasn't like that happened and they just kept on marching. They had to hang around and wait. We're already up past a week just from the time they left, and then they stayed in the camp. That's 6 days, and then however long it took them, at least 3 days. I'd say probably more though. So they're here, and they've left her in at least, I would say, 2 weeks at this point. When did she tie the ribbon around her window? When did she hang the cord out? When we go back, after they give her the instruction, in verse 21, then she said, according to your words, so be it. And she sent them away, and they departed. And she bound the scarlet cord in her window. She didn't wait around. She wasn't just going to wait until they showed up. She wasn't going to wait until they broke down the walls. No, there's no indication that she knew how they were going to defeat her people. She just believed that it was possible. Because as we looked last week at the examples that she had of God's power, she knew of what happened in Egypt. She knew of what happened to the kings that they had already come and encountered. And so she had that faith that they were capable of doing that the God that they worshiped was capable of destroying this city regardless of the strength of their military, regardless of the strength of their walls. What would you do? Would you wait until they start battering down? Maybe she's thinking of conventional warfare. You know, how are they going to get through? Well, maybe they've got some big special thing that they can break down the door. Or maybe they got some way that they can break open the wall and get in. Or maybe they're a bunch of spies and they're all going to sneak in at night somehow. Either way, she didn't wait around to figure out how that was going to happen. She went ahead and tied that thing on her window immediately. Now, it doesn't tell us, but I imagine they probably stayed pretty close to that house too. If her attitude was, we want salvation. We want to be saved from imminent doom. And I'm going to send you out, and I'm going to tie this thing on my window immediately, this red cord. I think it's a safe assumption to say that they're probably going to hang out there close to that house. Because that house was where that salvation was. The red ribbon indicated where. The house was the salvation. Let's go to John chapter 10 for a minute. As we look here, as Jesus is preaching, and he's given this parable about the good shepherd and where the sheep are safe. He says in this is John chapter 10, verse 7. Then Jesus said to them again, "Most assuredly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who ever come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved, and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief doesn't come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life, and that may have it more abundantly. I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. But a hireling, he who is not the shepherd, one who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming, and he leaves, and the sheep and flee, and the wolf catches the sheep and scatters them. The hireling flees because he is a hireling and does not care about the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and am known by my sheep. As the Father knows me, even so I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep." The sheep are safe in the fold. The sheep are safe in the little house that they've made to keep the sheep in when it's nighttime. And Jesus is comparing himself to the door of where it's safe. I am the door for the sheep. If you come in, you're safe. And I'm going to lay down my life to protect the sheep, he says. They're my sheep. It's not some hireling that's going to risk his life to protect something that's not his. They're my sheep. It's my fold. I'm the door. You will be safe if you enter in by me. He laid down his life. As Joe read Romans chapter 6, there is only one way to get into Christ. And that's through baptism. It's the only way. As Rahab ties this scarlet cord outside of her window, that signaled that that house was safe. And as long as she was in the house, she was safe. Anytime they left the house, they're taking their life in their own hands. Israel, she didn't know when was coming. She didn't know when they were coming. And so, as soon as they came and the battle started, if they got caught outside of that house, it didn't matter if the ribbon was tied there or not. If they weren't in it, their life could have been forfeit. So we see Jesus here saying, and this is one of several in John specifically that talks about Jesus says, I am. I am the door to safety. What do you think when Israel got their marching orders from the commander of the army of the Lord, and Joshua is there and he bows down and he worships, and the commander of the army of the Lord says, take off your shoes, for this is holy ground, and he gives the orders of saying, hey, here's what you're going to do. You're going to all get together, and you're going to take the ark, and you're going to walk around the city walls. You're going to do this every day for a week. And on the last day, you're going to do it 7 times. And on the last time, they're going to blow the trumpets, and you're going to cry out, and the walls are going to come tumbling down. Now, Rahab's in there, and Joshua remembers her. Remember Rahab the harlot, the one that saved the spies. Don't kill anybody in her house. And so they do this, and the walls come down, and Rahab's saved. And it says there that she and her family lived in Israel from that day forward, in the peace, in the rest that was found in the promised land of Israel. Can you imagine what that would have been like? I think we can. Maybe not exactly. Maybe not in the same sense that Rahab experienced that fear that possibly could have gripped her and everybody else in her family. The fear that there is an invading army around our walls. And we know what they've already done. What do you think it was like for her living inside the city walls? What would you have done? You've got your cords strung out there on the window. And they're marching around and they're not doing anything. And you're kind of thinking, well, okay, they're here, but they're not, it doesn't seem like they're attacking. Maybe that last day, and they do it more. And they're marching around 7 times now. And then they blow the trumpets. What are you thinking? I would imagine that the fear and the terror inside the city walls was building and mounting up. This tension, this concern, what are they doing? Why are they doing this? We got to do something. And then they blow the trumpets. And the walls maybe start to shake. What would you do if you were inside Rahab's house? What would you do if you were Rahab? What do you think if you weren't her? If you were just some guy there, just a couple of guys, and you're inside Jericho, and this is happening, and you're in the city center, away from the walls, and you see the walls start to come down. This past week, we in class, we looked at the events of 9/11, and watching that first tower come down. And we got on the website and we looked at some of those sources of people that were there. And we watched this one video of this, I don't know where they were, what they were doing, but they were in a building right across the street. And they had this video camera going and they were on the phone. This lady was on the phone talking to somebody, relaying what this guy was videoing. And you can hear the sheer panic in her voice. Oh, we gotta go. We gotta get out of here. What do you think? You think we gotta go? And then there was other video of people just scattering, running all over the place. I think that would be a pretty good indication of what was going on in Jericho at the time. A panic. What's happening to our walls? What's happening to the protection we had? We had this great, massive wall. Nobody can penetrate these walls. And they're just running in terror. Do you think that if you were in Rahab's house, you'd be tempted to leave? You're not away from the wall. You're in it. And it's starting to come down. What do? There are many that have left the sheepfold. They entered into the door. They came into Christ. They had the red scarlet ribbon tied out their window. They've been baptized for the remission of their sins. They were safe. And then it got hard. And they left. If Rahab and her family left those doors, there is no safety outside that house. There is no safety outside the sheepfold. There is no protection outside the church. As we look in Joshua chapter 6, verse 25, we see Joshua giving his orders. Joshua spared Rahab the harlot, her father's household, and all that she had. So she dwelled in Israel to this day, because she hid the messengers when Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. Did the red cord save her? Did staying inside that house save her? Those were just orders. Those were a sequence of things that she was supposed to do in order to have salvation. It was her faith that made her righteous, though. Her faith because she hid the spies. Her faith because she did what she was supposed to. The water is just water. Planet's covered with the stuff. It's the faith that saves. And if you once entered into the door, you can leave. It's possible. But there's no salvation outside. Ephesians chapter 2. We won't read all the way through to the end of this. But we'll look at verse 11. Therefore remember that you, once Gentiles in the flesh, who were called uncircumcised by what is called the circumcision made by the flesh by hands, that at the time you were without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenant of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. That was Rahab. She had absolutely no hope. She had no hope of salvation from the impending destruction of her city, if it hadn't have been for her profession of faith and obedience. She was without hope and without God in the world. But now in Christ Jesus, you who once were afar off have been brought near to the blood of Christ. I don't know how big her house was. The scriptures originally, it kind of looks like it was just kind of, whoever, you bring your family in. But Joshua's orders, when it came down to it, weren't specific to blood relatives. Let's do a DNA test to make sure that you actually belong to Rahab's family. It was whoever was inside that house was saved. We go and look at Noah's Ark. It wasn't just Noah's family that was saved, that was shut up in the ark. It was whoever got in on the boat was saved. Anybody who believed could have gotten in. Anybody who believed can be saved in the church. Ephesians chapter 4, beginning in verse 4. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called in one hope of your calling. One Lord, one faith, and one baptism. One God and Father of all, who is above all, and through all, and in you all. We can learn a lot from those who have gone before us, and the life they lived, the struggles that they had. We see Rahab's profession of faith, and we can marvel at it. I do. And thinking of the things that she knew and understood. I don't know that it was any easier for her to believe those things than it is for us to believe them now. But what about when it gets hard? What about when the walls outside start to crumble? And things get tough, and we're tempted to go back out into it. We're tempted to leave the safety of the sheepfold, the safety of the church. Every example that we have in the Bible of those who are outside, there is no hope for them. The hope is in the church. The hope is in the one Lord, the one Father above all, who is above all and in us all. Jesus Christ laid the foundation for the church. And we're all a part of it. We're all building on it. As long as you are inside. As long as you've tied the scarlet ribbon around the window. As long as you've entered into the door. As long as you have been buried with Him in baptism and raised to walk in newness of life. You're safe. You're safe. It doesn't matter what goes on outside. The walls come crumbling down. The world around us can burn. But we have been promised safety in Jesus Christ. Won't you be a part of that safety? Won't you put Christ on a baptism if you haven't? If you've left the house, if you've left the sheep door, if you've gone out and sought shelter elsewhere, come back in. Because there is only salvation in the Lord. Won't you come as we